Okay, 11 o'clock. Why don't we get started? So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ETF BILD webinar series. I'm Justin Mize. I'm the founder of Buntwood Communications Group. We're a financial services PR firm. When I was thinking about this webinar and realizing that I've actually worked in and around the ETF space since the 90s, it kind of blew my mind. However, that's just my day job. I moonlight as one of the co-founders of ETF BILD along with Viv Strench, Rich Geary, and John Jacobs. We created ETF BILD, kind of amazingly, it's 7 years ago now, 2017, just to kind of create a vehicle to surface some discussions in the industry that maybe get overlooked or maybe are more for insiders, insider professionals. And so I'll be your moderator today for a discussion we're really excited about: ETF marketing, digital, traditional, and more. It's the second in our Insider Series for industry professionals. We'll go about 30 minutes of discussion, maybe a little over, leaving time for some questions, and feel free to fire questions off through the chat feature. If they fit into the flow of the conversation, I'll take them on the fly. Otherwise, we'll try to save them for the end. We have a terrific panel to educate us today, and I suspect many of you probably know some of our panelists. Stephanie Sullivan, the COO of RAA Channel, who graciously stepped in for Julie Cooling, who was called away in an emergency last minute. Thank you, Stephanie. Andrew Chanin, co-founder and CEO of Procure, and Zach Chillig, managing director and head of marketing at Neos Investments. Thank you all for being here. Just to set the table, I think everybody that's going to be part of this conversation or watching this conversation later is engaged in the ETF space and are well aware of the size of the industry. It has just grown tremendously over the last, 35 years, I guess. Over $8 trillion in assets. Even though about 3/4 of those assets are probably controlled by the big three, there's still a significant opportunity for smaller shops and startups. But the question then becomes, well, how do firms compete? This may be where digital marketing comes in. It has the potential to level the playing field for smaller firms, but it's not without its own challenges, including what exactly is it? So Stephanie, if we could start with you, what is digital marketing and how should we think about digital marketing in the ETF space today?
Absolutely. Thank you again for having us. Most often when you think about digital marketing, what tends to come to mind first is typically advertising or email sends, but it's really so much more than that. It all starts with data. We look at digital marketing as really an opportunity to teach, to create intellectual property and having that communicated to the financial marketplace. So in the digital environment, firms can really attract more of the prospects while engaging in a way that's measurable and actionable. Just take, for example, RA database has 13F data. We maintain history of 13F filings, so firms are able to know exactly who owns your tickers, your competitors' tickers, and at what amount. Therefore, really making the targeting capabilities limitless. So really setting the stage here, digital marketing for us encompasses all of the touch points in which a user engages with your brand, your products, your content, whether that's videos, white papers, webcasts, podcasts, investment research, market outlooks, and so much more. But by taking these assets that you've created and delivering those to the most relevant audience.
That's great. It sounds overwhelming. Zach, if we go over to you for a little flavor of this. So you're on the other side from Stephanie. So as you look at digital marketing, I mean, Stephanie just laid out a wide menu of approaches here. How do you guys think about digital marketing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I think Stephanie did a great job of laying it out. And I think at its core, what's unique about ETF marketing specifically is that it's not something that really you can track down to the purchase. And it's a much different decision process than, say, buying insurance, where it's like, all of a sudden you need it and then you make a spur of the moment decision and you go through and you buy it. So I think Stephanie was spot on by saying you need to be very data driven. And I think there's a huge educational component. And I think with good data and through partners like RAA Channel, and other areas out there, you're able to reach the right audience at the right time and educate them so that when they are ready to make a decision, they think of your products versus, maybe a competitor, or they're aware of, what you offer and what your value props are. So.
Yeah, that's great. And Andrew, what would you add to that?
Yeah, specifically talking about digital marketing, there are, an incredible amount of options that are out there. And, there are those that, just even through our info ad on our website, we're getting sent with, a whole bunch of service providers that are looking to provide SEO or, different types of digital marketing strategies, as well as, tried and true providers that have been there for years providing various solutions. And, there's always new companies and ideas coming to market, and it's difficult to try to vet with the amount of solutions that are out there. But really at the start of it, you have to kind of figure out where is your company, where are you in this product life cycle, and where's your audience, and using the right tools through digital marketing to try to determine the best way of reaching that audience is probably the best way that you have to go about using your marketing budget as wisely as possible. And so it's never a one size fits all. It's never this worked for someone, so it's definitely going to work for me, or this didn't work for someone, so there's no way it will work for me. So you have to be pretty judicious in how you choose and allocate your budget. But not only is it not a one set solution for everyone, but it's also a multi-faceted approach in order to get your audience the right types of information at the right time. And it's something that you have to stay on top of almost as much as you have to stay on top of your own products and strategy there. So something that certainly takes a team, and there's a lot of people out there with a lot of great experience, advice, and solutions that are worth hearing out to see if what they're providing is a good fit for you and your firm.
Yeah, that's great, Andrew. If I could tease out a little more from you on that, and Zach, I'll probably ask you the same question, but getting more specific, Andrew, because I think the point's really well taken, right? That you have to tailor it and customize it to the audience for the particular product that you're selling. Could you talk a little bit about what that journey's been like for you guys with, any one of your products or all your products, in terms of how do you tailor, and then what are some of the things you're finding are most effective in terms of reaching the audience you want? And maybe, I don't know, maybe that ties back to the story you're telling. Maybe it ties back to your, additional technology or distribution partners, things like that. Anywhere you want to take it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Andrew, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the first part starts with understanding your product and who that product is for. And, there are numerous types of strategies out there. You'll hear people talk about, core or satellite. When you're looking at the, core strategies, these are something that typically, if investors make allocations, they might be much larger percentages of their allocations. They may not necessarily be extremely complex or have a lot of features that need to be really broken down, but they may. And for us, one area that we've really looked to focus on has been in the thematic area, and that's been an area that our firm believes that we can provide new exposures to people that are looking for, or maybe they're not aware of the opportunities yet in these themes, but we want to have a product there when they do come to that realization that this is something that they want to invest in. And so when looking at a satellite kind of focused fund, in the case of thematics, many of them do tend to fall into the satellite exposure. It might not necessarily be a huge percentage allocation that someone might put in their portfolio. So, what you're looking at trying to do is to get the awareness out. And for us, we kind of view products from two different camps. One is an awareness product, and one is an awareness plus education product. And it's my belief that an awareness product is something where someone sees the name, they understand what it is. They probably look at the holdings in the fund or in the index to see, does this represent that type of exposure that I'm looking for? And there's not too many complexities built in. There's not hedging or derivatives or other aspects where you really want to deeply understand all the fine print. Obviously, you want to understand exactly what you're investing in, but there might not be as many complexities. It might be a simple, hey, here's equity exposure to these types of companies. An awareness plus education type of strategy is one that not only does someone need to be aware that that strategy exists, but really how this ticks, how this works in different types of environments. If there are certain hedges that trigger at certain points, if there's other types of counterparty risks and beyond that they may want to consider so that they know in a certain environment, this is what I expect will happen with this fund. When you have an awareness plus education type of product, it takes a lot more. It's not just getting the word out, it's getting the word out, it's getting the education out. And there are a lot of tools and resources that you'll need to provide end investors with so that they can make that informed decision. For us, being in the thematic camp, we're looking at, currently we have two strategies in the market. One focuses on the space industry. Another focuses on companies that help before, during, and after natural disasters. And for us, we believe that these are significantly awareness focused products. So to the extent that someone wants to invest in this area, that's one type of digital strategy that we like to look at. So someone that's going out doing the research, maybe they're searching on Google saying, hey, I'm looking to invest in the space industry. Well, they might find an aerospace and defense strategy. They might find another type of space strategy. They might find something that's just a broad technology fund that has some companies that also touch on space. But for us, if that person is looking, we put out a lot of content. And part of our digital strategy is making sure that our search engine optimization strategy is hopefully reaching those people that are searching for these similar types of ideas so that when they do look for how to invest in space or things like that, we're hoping that they might find one of the many microblogs that we put together and host on our website. And we hope that by providing information not only about our funds and how they work, but also about the relevant industry, that people may see us as a thought leader in this area. And ultimately, when they are ready to invest in space and they've done all of their research and talked to their financial advisor, may consider us. The other is on the awareness front. So, how do you get in front of people that don't necessarily know that either that your fund exists or, hey, this is a strategy that, that might interest me or might have a spot in my portfolio. And so getting your thoughts and concepts out, through digital marketing strategies, through educational forums like a webinar such as this, become very helpful. And probably one of the best tools that you could have is your own database of subscribers. So people that are already aware of what you're doing, who your company is, they've wanted to follow you through different email blasts that you put out, whether that's regular updates about the fund, whether it's regular updates about the industry, or just, hey, what's new at your firm. That could be a really valuable piece of data that you have where you can go out and hopefully make further leads on, in addition to all of your approaches for trying to find new potential investors for those products.
That's great, Andrew. And Zach, kind of the same question. What would be your sort of, how does that apply to Neos? I guess same way, same kind of question. Like, how do you guys target? How do you present yourself to the marketplace, or what are the tools, sort of in line with what Andrew was saying, that you find most valuable?
Yeah, so I think Andrew did an awesome job of summarizing it, and I really like the way he categorized the awareness and awareness plus education type products. I would say at Neos, our products definitely fall into the awareness plus education because we are using, derivatives. We're offering, equity, fixed income exposures, and then layering on different types of derivative strategies on top of that. So I think, what Andrew touched on in being very clear and consistent with your messaging and understanding, what differentiates your product and ensuring that message comes through in all your materials, whether that's your owned media, your paid media, your earned media, so that whenever you're out there with your messaging, people start to associate certain themes or patterns with, your funds. For Andrew, like he said, he has the thematic products. For us, our products are income focused. And I think, understanding that as these themes become relevant, people may be actively searching for it, or maybe there's a time when a theme becomes, especially popular, that throughout the different avenues that you're promoting them, it's very important to kind of have that content there that makes it easy for the end user to understand, what your value props are.
That's great, Zach. And so Stephanie, actually picking up on what they were both Andrew and Zach were talking about in terms of, whether it's thematic or, whatever the product is or strategy, different things come in and out of favor. And these days with the flow of news and information, I mean, that could be during the course of a day. So, from your point of view, an RIA database and RIA channels point of view, like how do you guys think about targeting, think about timing, and how do you work with, firms like, Zach and Andrews, like in terms of helping them reach that audience at the right time?
Absolutely. So targeting, timing, it's everything. So at least to follow up on a couple of the points where they're talking about how critical education is. We look at this from the lens of webcasts. So we specialize in connecting asset managers and financial advisors. And really we think about webcasts as an opportunity to provide firms to talk about what they're doing, to position themselves, to discuss their strategy, the asset class, and provide direct access to their investment team. And from the advisor standpoint, this is beneficial because they get to receive continuing education while really listening into that story. With that being said, the targeting and the ability to reach out and put themselves in front of the right contacts during a webcast, advisors are asking questions, they're downloading materials, they're answering polls or taking surveys. So you're getting so many different touch points and direct feedback on concerns and feedback on the strategy, or are they investing in them, or do they have plans to invest in them? So this digital environment is creating an ample amount of data where you're able to then take that back into kind of consideration and then continue to nurture and follow up with them and provide them with additional awareness and education on the products and strategies.
Yeah, that's great. And it wasn't something I think I put in our outline for things to cover, but content, I guess, would be such a critical component to this. I think I kind of overlooked it. We were talking about it because it's sort of a given, but maybe Zach, if I could start with you and then go kind of reverse now, Zach, Andrew, Stephanie, just sort of talk about content. A couple things I would ask. How do you think about content? And one of the things I know from clients we work with a lot is that the content creation process can be such a burden and it may be a hindrance to a successful program too. So just curious for all of your thoughts on how to make all that work, think about the right content, how to get it created, how to keep it consistent. How do you have a consistent, successful process?
Yeah, it's a great question, and content is such a big buzzword, and frankly, sometimes it annoys me, and I feel that burden and have been through it. But I think our philosophy here and what we've seen work best, and you can kind of relate it back to the ETF structure, right? At their core, ETFs are transparent and accessible vehicles, and I think that's the way you want to approach your content. You want your content to be very clear, you want it to be accessible, and you want it to be consistent. And I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier is that being very clear on your product differentiators, because if you're not clear on them and you don't understand kind of the 2 to 3 really core value props of each of your funds, and you're not clear about it in communicating it, excuse me, throughout your content, wherever that may appear, again through owned, earned, or paid media, then I think the end user is not going to be clear. And I think it's about kind of having different levels of content, right? It's the core value props, it's the ability to provide some more information and then kind of expand on those core value props, but remain consistent in what the topics are throughout the content journey.
Yeah, that's great. And Andrew, please.
I would say, we probably have kind of more of a shotgun approach for some of our strategy. There's so much content that's out there, whether that's video, audio, with podcasts, whether it's actually getting large audiences from other media platforms, and being a live speaker, or some of those opportunities, and working with your PR firm to get those opportunities lined up. Those are all really important. That said, for us, it's not even always just focus on our funds. I'm fortunate enough to work with an ETF industry legend, Bob Tull, who was there at the very early days of the ETF industry, and his knowledge of even the early days in the formation of the ETF industry, I think gives us a very different angle than some other firms out there, where he can be a resource to talk about the entire where ETFs even came from, coming out of the crash in the 1980s and saying, hey, mutual funds might not be the perfect vehicle. We need something new, and being on the front lines and being in those conversations and pitching these 40 Act products to the SEC. We have a great opportunity to educate people on just ETF industry history, and that's hopefully great for bringing credibility and showing the experience and leadership that our team has. For me, I started in 2007 in the ETF industry, and those days of marketing and distribution were completely different than what we're looking at today. We used to say kind of back then, if you launch it, they will buy. And pretty much all you had to do was put an ETF in the market, and there's a really good chance it would hit some type of critical mass and raise enough assets pretty early on. And fortunately or unfortunately, those days have changed, and it's become a significantly more competitive marketplace where you have so many providers, former mutual fund companies now entering the space, insurance companies entering the space, foreign asset managers and insurance companies entering the space and into new markets like the US and beyond. So there is, a huge amount of competition and trying to get the word out. For us, a big part that becomes important with content is, not just focusing on, the history of ETFs and, and that genesis, but also in these specific themes. So one thing when we look to bring out these products is, not only do we hope to bring out products that are long-term themes, but also ones that are first to market strategies, so that the media hasn't been completely cluttered with other people also promoting these strategies and getting into these heated competitions about the nuance of how your thematic fund is slightly different than someone else's and trying to prove that out. But hopefully from the early formation of your funds, you're working with index providers that really understand that difference, and that when having a passive thematic fund, that index methodology becomes really important, because a lot of the content that you will build is relevant to the index methodology and how that works, the types of companies that includes, the industry that can be considered, that looking at that universe, and then looking at news items that move those industries, potential catalysts. Right now, the things that people really want to talk about when looking at the ETF market tends to be AI. It tends to be income and high yield. It's looking at cryptocurrency seems to cover about 90% of the conversation on exchange traded products at this very moment. But everything is cyclical, and different strategies have different times to shine. And making sure that you have content that can find users that are looking for it, whether that's putting blogs up on your site, whether that's getting media opportunities, whether it's doing video format types of opportunities that aren't just a one time get those interviews out there and then they disappear, but having something that can be approved by compliance before and afterwards, so that it can live somewhere, so that as people are trying to get that information, as that cycle becomes relevant, you're there and you're able to get in front of them is absolutely critical. So constantly coming up with content. We try to put stuff up no less than monthly, whether that's the monthly newsletters that we put out that capture the industries that our funds follow, or these microblog pieces that's looking at what's going on in the world. Because ultimately, as people are looking at news events, you want to be able to teach people how different companies are related to those broader stories, and how they might be able to get exposure to those in-demand industries when they happen.
Yeah, that's great. And Stephanie, obviously, you guys are constantly producing content, working with firms, like Andrew and Zach. What's your advice, or how do you guys think about content, or what do you advise these firms, like when they're thinking about content? Like, what's effective, I guess, maybe from a content perspective?
Absolutely. So it takes, exactly as Andrew and Zach have said, it takes a lot of time and energy to create these assets, and making sure they're being utilized. But consistency, as they've mentioned, it's incredibly important to be consistent in your approach, to continuously stay top of mind, and really map out that content in your follow-up strategy, to ensure that you're providing the audience with the information to continue learning and growing with your firm, and staying top of mind for them. I'd also kind of echo the comments on find the opportunities where you can repurpose content. So investing in, just thinking like a webcast. From a webcast you run, you can take the MP4, create little bite-sized snippets, and share that on your website, and create 6 different pieces off of just that one event that you've already run. You can take pulling in survey results and reshare those aggregate responses on social media, extracting the audio from an event and turning that into a podcast. So really, the options are endless to utilize one investment of your time and energy and then turn it into a handful of other pieces that you can then repurpose and reuse to stay on top of things.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and you all bring up this interesting question, I guess. Okay, and we get this a lot even on the PR side, even though we're not doing exactly what we're talking about here. But social media, how's that playing? Direct marketing, whether that's email or is it through Google AdWords, through LinkedIn advertising. I mean, the toolbox is pretty large, so it'd really be interesting. And maybe Zach, will start with you this time, then go to Andrew back around. Like, what do you guys find is most effective, at least for the audience you're after, when we think about this full toolbox? Or are you trying to use everything in an integrated way? Just curious for thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And when we think about it, and when I'm thinking about where do we want to invest our money or what do we want to emphasize, I guess there's never one thing that works best. If there was always one thing that worked best, then I would take as much of my budget as I could, and I would ask for more budget, and I would always do that. So I think it's a combination of things, and I think as smaller firms that are really trying to break through, the universe of digital marketing is so big, and there's so many players in the space that have a ton of firepower. And Stephanie sees it, I'm sure, firsthand every day that when a firm like Neos may go to RIA channel, what we're in the way in which literally that we're able, based on budgetary constraints, to work with RIA channel versus the way an iShares or State Street is able to work with RIA channel are two completely different things. And I think you have to look at tactic by tactic. What when you invest your money in a specific tactic, what sort of market share, what voice are you going to get from that tactic? So I think a great example, like Stephanie brought up, is a webinar. So if you sign up for a webinar for RIA channel, that's kind of a set cost, or any other provider just using RIA channel, because that's a good example for right now. But for that hour that you have a CE credit webinar, that webinar is yours, in the same way that if iShares signed up for a 1 hour CE credit webinar, they have full attention. So I think you can contrast that versus trying to put digital banners around the internet or putting out a ton of content. Just the volume that these bigger firms are able to do, just it's kind of the way it is. They're going to wash out smaller firms. So I think smaller firms need to be very strategic and tactical in thinking about even for marketing, like where can you put digital banners in a small area that you're going to reach your audience and that your voice can get through. How can you work with a partner like RIA channel to get a dedicated email, and for that email, that's your email. And if iShares or someone else were to do a dedicated email, you basically puts you on a level playing field with those in those tactics. So I guess what it comes down to for us is trying to find tactics that when we do it, we own it, and we're in a level playing field with some of the bigger players. And kind of ties back to what we were talking about before, is having good content, being consistent in your messaging, and understanding where you can make an impact kind of with limited dollars. And maybe it's not the best answer. Like, it's not like webinars are always the best, Google AdWords are always the best, digital ads are always the best. But I think it's understanding, based on your product and based on the market cycle, where can you invest money to kind of have an equivalent voice to some of the bigger players in the space that are also competing for market share.
Yeah, that's great. And Andrew, kind of same question. Like, when you think about the digital marketing toolbox, what do you guys focus on? Or do you try to incorporate pieces of everything? Or
Yeah, there's a lot that can be done, and not necessarily everything makes sense at every time for every type of strategy or fund complex. And I think one thing that we haven't really gone into too much yet is the burden of compliance. And you could be know nothing Ned on Twitter or on some stock board, and you could post the most bullish or bearish flagrant opinions on anything, and drum up a huge audience of people that are interested in some very evocative type of conversation there. Well, when you work in the realm that Zach and I and others are, compliance is a major factor. So, when you're putting stuff out online, most of the stuff has to be pre-approved. So there's a whole kind of timeline that needs to go through and a whole process of checks and approvals before you can even go forward with many strategies. So, being timely and being relevant is extremely important, but it also can be very expensive and take a ton of resources to focus on getting something out there as quickly as possible. And we've seen approaches where people have said, "Oh, we'll make you a social media star overnight by taking over your X accounts and doing whatever to drum up interest and engagements and whatnot." And the reality is, people that have large audiences on social media do have the ability to get huge messages out and have the ability for that to go viral or to go out to all different types of networks or interested topic areas for your theme. But the reality also is that it's not that easy. And so um everything does need to take, a good amount of time, good amount of focus, because the last thing you want to do is put something out there that ends up, not being approved, or not being appropriate, and, potentially getting a fine or having, different types of penalties. So, I think one great thing, and something that, Stephanie's firm, offers is, they have their own databases. So when you work with a company that has their own audiences and databases, and like Zach said, you can, kind of like piggyback off of getting your message out in front of other groups, audiences. That's fantastic. Because they might not know about you yet, and now someone that is a trusted source is now helping to get you engaged with their audience, and hopefully you're able to find those adapters for you.
Yeah.
Um, and it's having your own content, but probably, and this is the absolute toughest thing, but the best thing that I've ever seen for success in flows and getting interest in your product is when a completely random third party becomes an evangelist for your product, and they're going out and they're not financially motivated, they're not getting basis points or marketing spend or anything from you, but to the extent that you can get your awareness for your product or your strategy or your entire suite of products out there, someone else does the research and they become a true believer when they're out there promoting your product almost on your behalf. That's the most powerful thing that I've seen. And they don't stumble upon your product unless you have put already a lot of the basis into building out content on your website, getting out in front of public audiences. Maybe it's in our, an RIA, a financial advisor learns about your product through an interview or a webinar that you've done, and the whole country club kind of theme where they talk to their golf buddy and they're talking to their other person, and all of a sudden, there's these vast pockets of wealth that are now familiar with it and becomes a much more common conversation. But so much is some of the grassroots stuff that you can't force anyone to do. But when it does happen and you can get to that point because your message has gotten out there, that can be one of the most powerful things out there.
Yeah, that's great. And Stephanie, I mean, Andrew already kind of gave a segue into what you guys do. Maybe you could pick up where he left off there.
Absolutely. And Andrew touched on a really good point, and we've kind of hit on this a few different ways. Keeping that message into such a clear way for the audience to be able to regurgitate that back in a way, making sure that it comes across so you're educating them on what you're doing, but also how they can share that with their audience as a whole. So all of the different ways in which reaching out, we talked about producing content, we talked about running webcasts, doing dedicated email marketing sends. All of that is great, but it's also so important to look at the data, look at the engagement, look at the analytics behind it. What is making the most sense for your investment and your strategy? What is the prime kind of audience that you're looking to engage with? What are they clicking on the most? And having that data and those touch points and being able to look back at a specific strategy or specific focus is going to be detrimental to really making sure you're investing in the right places. You're spending your time and energy in digital marketing, doing the right thing. So Sometimes that might be, sharing a webcast and doing it with other thought leaders in the industry and getting that awareness out on your firm. And other times it may be having that 100% share voice to really own the message and have that brand and topic recognition.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and there's another topic comes out of that too, Stephanie, and we even get asked this a lot on the PR side, but you guys must get it a lot, which is, can I buy a list? How do I get distribution? I mean, Andrew and Zach have both talked about building your own database and a connection. We all know that is a time-consuming process. Everything we've talked about that takes years to really build that. Um, but how if someone is starting up or someone is trying to build a brand or enter a new area, like what are some of the ways they can? I mean, again, we've already covered all the things you guys have described in the last half hour that are part of this program to build that. Um, I'm not sure there's any real shortcuts, but obviously, Stephanie, what you guys do, I think, is a huge boost for getting distribution. I liked your thought also about partnering with other thought leaders. But I'm just curious for the group, any other thoughts on, how do you amplify, I guess, and how do you reach new audiences that you're not already engaged with? And maybe Stephanie, we can start with you. And we'll go back through.
Right. I would say finding the right partners. Finding the right partners to maybe start with carving out that segment of the industry that is of most interest, or getting your message out in front of the right advisors. I think when you're just starting out, having those partnerships in your pocket are critical. So then you can then take those leads into your CRM system, in your back pocket to start marketing and continuing nurturing them from there. So I would say partnership is probably the key component from my side.
Great. Zach, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I think building that list and something, maybe it's better suited for Stephanie, but what she mentioned, a key phrase at the beginning of the webcast was 13F data. And at your disposal when you're starting up, there's different databases and lists that you can subscribe to. Again, one of them is RIA channel. There's others out there like Discovery Data or I think, Advisor Pro, a number of others. But a lot of them are integrating 13F data. And I think that's probably something Stephanie, as a pro literally from RIA channel, is one of the ones building that database, is probably better suited to talk about. But that allows you to, along with other filters, kind of segment a group of advisors. Just to riff here, it could literally be like, show me 13F data that they are invested in a competing or a complementary product to ours, and then another filter within these databases that firms like RIA channel offer could be like, show me folks that are not duly registered independent RIAs that do retail business. And then, right there from day one, you have a list of folks to go after. And then it, kind of boils back down to everything we've touched on so far is the consistency of your pitch, your content, and, ensuring that when you do reach them and get your attention, your messaging is clear and your value props are very apparent.
Yeah, that's great. And Andrew, just thinking now about it, we were talking about distribution platforms before the call, and maybe that's kind of a bridge from what Stephanie and Zach were just talking about and some of the things you were saying before. Because, I always think of it, there's always been this discussion. We're trying to get more distribution, we're trying to get in front of other folks, but it's also about shelf space too, as part of the whole strategy here. So love to hear your kind of worldview on how all that fits together.
Yeah, so back when I was starting off in the ETF industry, kind of platform gatekeepers didn't really exist. It was something where if you launched a fund, it's now publicly traded, and anyone that has access to invest in American Stock Exchange securities or Nasdaq or ARCA could pretty much get exposure to. And as time has moved on, this gatekeeper role that approves or doesn't allow products onto their own advisor platform has become a pretty big hurdle, especially for more independent or startup ETF issuers. So one hurdle that you face in that scenario is if you're not on the platforms, it's very difficult for anyone on those platforms to invest. Now, some do have the allowance for if there's a client that really wants exposure, they can fill out a whole bunch of forms. It's an unsolicited purchase request, and after jumping through a whole bunch of hoops, they may finally be allowed to invest in that product. But an advisor is almost, certainly unable to say, I really like this idea, I really like this exposure. It's not on the platform, but I'm going to allocate X% of my client portfolios to this theme. It's almost impossible for that to happen if it's not approved on the platform for the most case. And so, um, you know, before you're approved on those platforms, you're really limited to who it makes sense to spend your marketing dollars to try to go out and find. And so, your first movers, instead of becoming, the large, advisory shops in the country to go out and put, 10 to 20 to $100 million into your strategy, is, a lot more, again, grassroots, looking for independent advisors and getting your message out to the retail community so that they can be your first movers. And, as your fund AUM, as your volume, as your daily value traded of your funds go up, you may be fortunate enough to get approved on these platforms that can open up your funds to a lot more exposure to capital. Now, many of these platforms, once you have gotten approved, then charge you fees like onboarding fees or data licensing fees, or they'll let you have a better idea of who on their platform is investing in their funds. Some charge, flat fees, some charge depending on how many funds you have on the platform. Some are even asking for, percentages of revenues from the people on their platform that are investing in your funds. And so now that also becomes part of your marketing budget strategy. Does it make sense to be on these platforms? Will I be able to find a big enough audience on these platforms that justifies me paying these entry fees and ongoing fees to be there? And if you are paying those fees, you need to be doing so much to make sure that your message is staying fresh and relevant. And so doing things like webinars where they can find these advisors, or working directly even with those platforms themselves to figure out how can you work with them to expand your relationship, whether that's, sponsoring events that they throw for their advisors or other types of ways of getting creative to get in front of them becomes very critical. And then also having, boots on the ground, which isn't really part of your digital strategy at all, but making sure that you're showing up on the trading floor or in their offices so that they know who you're there and getting your message across. But the two really important parts, of digital that I don't think you can kind of under discuss is your website. Your website is the part that faces the public. Yes, there might be other ETF centric or financial centric websites out there that provide information and news articles and research and data, but your website is your face to the world as far as what your company does, who's on your team, what makes you different, and what you're offering to the world. So being able to keep that website fresh with new content, with accurate information, and so that when people do search for you, when they come to your site, they have a very helpful experience in getting the information that they came for, is really important. And then being able to sign up to subscribe for updates or whatnot, you come into that database that we're all talking about that's critical to build. And so to have a CRM that also then allows you to know who's actually reading your materials as you put it out, who should you be following up on, who's actually coming back to your website, how much time are they spending on your website, which articles are they spending the most time on, are they sharing these articles with other people, what types of people are finding this interesting. That becomes a really valuable tool for you to be able to go out and follow up with those parties to make sure that you're addressing any needs that they have, and so that something that they might perceive, which may be true or may not be true, you can correct that to help push them into the camp of ultimately becoming someone that might want to invest in your funds.
Yeah, and that's great. I'm so glad you brought up that final piece there too, Andrew, about the CRM and the tracking, because I wanted to ask that because I know we're winding down on time, but kind of go around again with everyone, and maybe you could expand, Andrew, then I'll work back, Zach, back to Stephanie. But what other technology do I need to be effective, running, a thoughtful digital strategy? I mean, I've heard CRMs come up. We probably need other tools for tracking and monitoring and communication. Some of these things, maybe a CRM can do a lot of. It depends on the platform. So, yeah, just curious, Andrew, if you could expand a little bit on some of the other technology that you find is essential to being effective on the digital marketing side.
Yeah, when in the early days of the first ETF company that I started, PureShares, we were working with HubSpot, and they weren't as much of a household name at the time. Now, they're up there with Salesforce and some of the other really big CRM platforms. but being able to build your website intelligently from the start so that you can intertwine it with your various databases. If it's if you're tracking things from Google and whatnot, to get an idea of, we were really interested in, we had a cybersecurity focused fund, and just seeing where interest from around the world was coming from in our website. Sometimes you'd find the most obscure information looking at Google Analytics to find out, hey, there's a ton of interest all of a sudden from this random country across the ocean. What happened there that all of a sudden made them very interested? Was it some cyber attack happened and now they're all looking for investing and they stumble across you? Or was there some local news outlet that came out and put something out and happened to mention you in it, and now you're getting a lot of traffic? And certainly you're limited in how you can go and reach out to foreign investors and things like that, but it might even be within the US. If all of a sudden you're getting a huge amount of interest from Florida, well, let me look at the analytics and try to figure out how did that happen and how can I better amplify that, or maybe I should be spending a lot of time on the sales front, reaching out and calling those areas because this is, an important topic. So there are technologies, there's tools, there's, third party things that you can, add on top of what you're doing. But I think, a lot of it comes from, being able to get your message out through whether it's, digital ads, the SEO that you have on your website to pull those people in now as they're looking for these types of themes. But certainly different CRMs can be really helpful as the interest is coming in, being able to stay on top and follow up and have some type of plan to go out and make sure that that message doesn't just become a click and then forget it, but something that brings on hopefully a long-term investor for you.
Yeah, that's great. And Zach, anything? So Andrew obviously went deep on the CRM side. Any other tools that you guys use or you recommend, or other take on the CRM piece of it for tracking and monitoring, or anything?
Yeah, no, I think Google Analytics is very important to understand where people are spending time. I think your CRM is incredibly important, and I think after you launch an ETF and you're ready to start marketing it, I think, like we said, step one is defining your audience and who's eligible to buy it. So obviously that's going to be the retail public. That's not something that you're going to want in your CRM, because that's not, or that could be maybe more so in your marketing automation platform. But I think there's a split between the marketing automation platform and the CRM, which I typically think of as more on the financial professional side, and what a registered sales desk rep is going to be using. And then I think it's important to have access to, like we said, very good data so that you can kind of segment who your audience is day one, and then kind of get that in there, understand what firms are they at, what are their AUM size, tag them, segment them in Salesforce, or whatever CRM you use, based on how you export or segment it within a partner database like an RIA channel or a discovery data. And then what that allows you to do is then create different marketing campaigns to those folks. And it is outside of software cost and your time. It's essentially free to send an email, or even like we did today, outside of a WebEx subscription. Other than your time and a WebEx subscription, to host your own webinars and even if you get a couple advisors on the phone, it makes it worth the time and energy you put into it. So I think it's about like we kept saying from the beginning, is having good data, and then keeping it clean in your CRM systems, and then having good connectivity between your other outbound marketing tools, obviously your website, and then other marketing automation platforms that allow you to make use of the data that's in your CRM, that ultimately, especially starting out, can come from a partner like an RA channel. That's kind of how I would tie the wheel together.
Great. Well, that's a nice pass over to you, Stephanie, anyway. So where would you go with it?
Thank you. Yeah. So, just a couple additional things to that. So investing in that good quality solution that's going to ensure you're really delivering the message to the right context. So whether that's at HubSpot, the Marketo, the right tools that are going to actually get you into their inboxes. But we're also seeing a lot of success with data dashboards. We're finding that they're crucial to really making the connection between the marketing initiatives and the sales. So we integrate all of the different marketing campaigns into a single view and overlay lead scoring on top of that to to able to really see that full picture of a prospect's journey and all those different touch points and where they're watching a video or where they're downloading a fact sheet or a white paper and tying that all together. I think those are critical tools to really making sure you're investing the right time and energy everywhere.
Oh, that's great. And thank you, Stephanie. I'm just watching, we just blew through 45 minutes. This has been great. I think we all probably talked for another 2 hours. Let me just capture, there's a couple questions here. Maybe not for every, we can cherry pick who wants to answer what, but SEO has come up. And Andrew, I know you mentioned it, but SEO is such a funny one. Again, it's something people ask us about even on the PR side and how much energy to put into it. Should I hire an SEO firm? So I'm going to go broader than just the question of SEO because curious for anyone's take on how much energy do you put into SEO, and kind of related to that is, do you have evidence that you're getting organic search coming back to you, or organic results, let's say, coming back to you? So like it should be a virtuous circle if SEO is working, but it's also super time consuming as well. So just curious, I don't know, maybe Zach or Andrew, maybe it's more in your world to respond to that since you guys are the ones on that side of it.
I'm happy to kick this one off. I have a call actually right after this webinar with the SEO team that we've just engaged, and we've done Google AdWords and things like that, putting out different programmatic strategies and whatnot. And one thing that we've realized is I think some of the most useful pieces of information are the things that we're developing on our own website. And we had not been utilizing SEO to the fullest extent that we could. We put out what I think would be a great blog piece, and at the end of the day, the only people that were finding it were people that were already coming to our website because they already knew about us, or as people that were already in our distribution list because they've signed up. But those people kind of already knew what we're doing, and for us, when you spend the amount of time and putting together an article doesn't just mean, okay, you came up with a great article, and now it's approved and it's on your website. You have to pay, your compliance company to review it and approve it. You have to pay for FINRA to then also receive it. You have to pay to get your new website approved that's going to include this link. So, I mean, it's expensive, it's time consuming. You put a lot of, time even putting the article together in the first place. If you're not getting the most exposure possible out of it, then you're really not getting all your time and money's worth. So we are working with the team now, and we'll be spending a significant percentage of our budget focusing on how do we expand our SEO. So if we're putting this out there, we're putting the time in, we're putting it on our site, we think that these are topics that people are looking for, and they haven't been presented with our solutions. And so for us, working with a third party is going to be pretty critical. All that said, too, we have two marketing professionals on our team. One of them happens to be my cousin who did sales for an index provider before we started working together. So she was very familiar with the industry and what ETFs and indexes were and how to market to the this community. But we still feel like working with an external team is going to help us best maximize the efforts that we're already putting in on our end. So we're going to probably be putting over 50% of our marketing spend into enhancing SEO to better drive the stuff that we're just doing organically on our end. And we can do a follow-up of this in 6 months and see where that's gotten us, and happy to do that as well.
That's great. Zach, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I on my end, I'm actually not the biggest SEO believer, which is funny. And there's no right answer, and I think what it comes back to is understanding, right, like how much firepower it takes to actually organically rank on Google. You're going against these firms that have had websites that have been on Google for decades. They have thousands of pages. They have outbound links. They have incredible reputational scores. And Google's a funny place, right? Google tries to be fair to all, but that's not the case. And I'm a firm believer in that good paid search or search engine marketing drives SEO. So I think a thoughtful approach to understanding what are the topics that are very specifically relevant to your firm. What do you want people to find, when you're searching? I believe it's very important to have a well-written article with, keywords included in mind. And, it's important to do your research and understand what keywords or topics are ranking highly. And then obviously have your copy, written with that in mind. So those, it's topical and those words are included throughout the piece. But when you do that right, when you have content that does a very good job at aligning with the keywords or topics you're trying to rank organically for, the cost to advertise on it significantly comes down. So Google wants to entice people to spend money to advertise their own properties versus if you want to advertise against a competitor, Google's going to recognize like it's a different URL, it's a different product, the content is slightly different than what you're advertising for. You're going to have to pay more. So I'm a very firm believer in owning your message and owning your territory, right? So I think firms should always invest even a little bit of money to have paid search for their websites, for their main blog posts, because again, it's going to be cheap because the entire kind of journey there is going to match up, and Google does reward that when they see content and paid messaging align. They'll reward that with a cheaper cost versus, that I guess that's their way of allowing smaller firms to compete with like a bigger firm that has a limited budget and just wants to try to, troll your web search, which will happen as well and is going to happen. But again, that's why I think it's super important to single out a few pieces and topics that are really important for first-time website viewers. Spend money to, again, like what Andrew was saying, have it professionally written so that it includes the proper keywords, and outbound links. But then you have to invest in some paid search to get clicks to that page. And again, SEO builds not only with the content on your page, but the visits to your site and the amount of time that the site, has been basically on the internet. You build your reputation. So that's a huge part of it too. I think it's very synergistic, and I think you have to be strategic about what you're writing about. And then I think you have to be strategic about kind of boosting it a little bit through paid advertising on Google.
Yeah, that's great, Zach. And Stephanie, any additional thoughts there because I'll go to a wrap-up question for everybody after this. Yeah.
I really think Andrew and Zach covered it well. I think if you don't have an expert on your team in-house, it's always beneficial to partner and work with them to make sure you're really maximizing and making that right investment there.
That's great. I do want to squeeze in, we have a couple minutes more. I want to squeeze in one other question that came through, which is about measurement. And I guess the real question is, how do you decide if you got the ROI you wanted out of a tactic in digital marketing? And has it been worth it? Is measurement in terms of, weeks, months? Is it a year? How do you guys think about it? So maybe Stephanie, if you want to start, Zach, Andrew, and then I'll do a quick wrap-up question for everybody. Other final thoughts.
Sure. In working with firms, we say first and foremost measurement from an assets under management standpoint. Are you seeing growth? Secondly, the number of calls and meetings that are stemming from the specific sponsorship or campaign. And then taking a look at that overall lead scoring. Are they increasing their engagement with your firm? Are they continuously having those touch points with you? So those would be different ways that we're looking from a measurement of success there.
That's great. Zach?
Yeah, I think that's totally right. Like for example, we've done webinars with our RIA channel before, and after you host a webinar with a partner like an RIA channel or someone else, you get a list of folks that attended the webinar, and the data kind of speaks, for itself in first person, right? Are people answering the phone? Are they willing to hear about your product? Did they just sign up because they wanted CE credit, or were they actually interested? And we found that people are willing to speak to us after getting on webinars that we've done with our RIA channel or other folks. And then I think Stephanie also said it great. I mean, it's assets under management, right? You can't tie it one-to-one, like someone goes into a cart and checks out, an e-com or product, but it's kind of over time, like, are you seeing trading volume increase? Are more and more people entertaining, your phone calls? Are your lists growing? Are your email opens and clicks growing? Is the time on your website growing? So I think it's trying to match up trends, but it's kind of impossible to do, a 1-for-1 match. What you can do, it's a whole nother cost, and we could spend a whole nother webinar talking about it, is Broadridge data, which at the office level will show you who's invested in your products. So if you do a webinar, you're having conversations on the financial professional side, you can match up and see offices or firms that were in attendance on a webinar at a certain date, and then assets held at an office at a certain date and time, and that's probably the closest you can get to a one-to-one match before kind of piping in data from wirehouses. But again, that's a whole nother topic and a whole nother cost, and it's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, exactly. Andrew, maybe final thoughts on that topic?
AUM and volume over duration of campaign. And for me, it's, if you're not seeing any results or upticks there, then it might not be worth the spend.
Fair enough. Well, I think given the time, we're going to have to leave it there. I just want to thank all of you again for making time for this great discussion. This was really fabulous. I think, everybody, everybody that's going to get a chance to see this, whether they're watching it live now or later, are really going to appreciate it. So thank you again. And for anybody else who is watching live or in the future, if you want to see more on this content or more content like this, you can go to the etfbuild.com website. This will be posted up there, and you can share it from there, or obviously from all of our LinkedIns. It'll be available that way as well. And I'll close there, and thank you again all. Really appreciate it. Everybody have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you.